In tonight's Cruiseweek show, we are helping you save money at the border. We have Susan, a CPA, as our guest to help you navigate customs and import forms and fees as you return with all of those gifts from your cruise. We have our photo of the week, and Chali is off partying with her newfound CCPPF buddies for her 69th birthday this weekend, so she is a little busy with her Chippendale dancers to be on this week's show. We have our latest cruise news, and of course, your questions and answers. Stay tuned with us, for this is Cruiseweek TV Live. Welcome to the show. I am your host, Matt, and this is a show where we, the newbie cruisers, learn the tips and money-saving tricks from the experts together with you and enable you to ask them questions so we all get to become better cruisers. Our main guest tonight is Susan. She is a CPA and very well versed in navigating the customs forms and rules so you don't end up with big fines or being taken into a secondary checks and processing, which could cause you to be late or miss your flight home. This show is interactive, so if you have cruise questions, type it in the comments below, and we will get to the questions later on in the show. Chali is out tonight getting her hands full of bottles of wine purchased at the one-day sale at the local liquor store and partying like it's her birthday. Well, it actually is her birthday, so happy birthday, Chali. But back to the present and the cruise news. For the first time, the number of cruise ships scheduled to dock in Charleston in South Carolina has hit the state ports authority's voluntary 104-ship annual limit, and that could send some cruise ship business elsewhere. The passenger ship terminal on the Charleston Peninsula is also scheduled for a maximum number of cruise ships in 2018. Cruise lines tend to plan and schedules far in advance so that they can advertise and book passengers. Across the Charleston Harbor, Mount Pleasant Councilman Gary Santos has for years been advocating for the idea that smaller cruise ships could drop anchor in commercial anchorage near Fort Sumter and shuttle passengers to Mount Pleasant in small boats or tenders. The cruise ships that Santos is courting are smaller luxury lines that typically carry several hundred passengers rather than thousands, like the Carnival Ecstasy, which anchors in Charleston's cruise ship trade. We are heading off on the Carnival Horizon for our first ever Cruiseweek Live group cruise next year. The date is February 23rd, 2019, and it's organized by our friends at Good Memories Travel. If you book through them before the end of this month, you only need to put down the deposit and you'll be entered into the Cruiseweek drawing to win a $500 credit. Not only that, but you get to come with me, Joe, and Bird on our live streaming cruise. We're visiting Grand Turk, San Juan, St. Kitts, and St. Martin, so call Good Memories Travel to book and enter into the $500 cash drawing. You can get extra benefits when booking with a travel agent over booking direct with cruise lines. But whatever cruise you are planning to do, give Good Memories Travel a call. You get the same great rates as booking yourself, plus you may get onboard credit or a customer reward. Yes, they actually give you money to go cruise with. They enjoy planning and helping you with weddings and honeymoons. Good Memories Travel also specializes in handling every aspect of your group cruise, family getaway, or that family reunion you've been wanting to plan. Imagine letting someone else do all the work while you get to relax. Good Memories Travel also plans various Christian-related group cruises. Their God is Good group cruise is coming up, so be sure to check that out on their website. They handle, of course, cruises for all cruise lines like Carnival, Royal, MSC, and Norwegian, and more all over the world. They are fully licensed by the CLIA, which stands for Cruise Lines International Association, and they've also been earmarked by Disney. Debbie Smith is part of Cruise Planners, so give her a call to see what they can do for you. It doesn't cost you a thing to look them up and get your best rate. Call Debbie for a free, no-obligation quote on your next cruise. What have you got to lose? Debbie can be reached at 321-338-2953, and of course through their website at goodmemoriestravel.com, and let them know you heard about Cruiseweek TV. You know the deal. You're off the ship shopping at the duty free, and on the islands you see a bargain that you just have to get in. It's only on the way home last night when those little blue custom slips are put into your room and they start to think, did I get a receipt, or how much allowance am I over? I sometimes am followed by the thought of, do I risk it and not declare this? Well, my next guest can help you with all of that. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Hello.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And you?
I'm doing pretty well. Bit drained, but I'm getting in there. Got some coffee and slowly get into my night. So, Susan, what is a CPA exactly?
A CPA is a certified public accountant licensed in by individual states in the United States to provide a variety of services. I'm also an enrolled agent, which means I'm licensed directly from the IRS, but that's related mostly to income taxes. But I'm a little bit of a tax nerd, and international taxation is my specialty. So I do know a good bit about the duty-free thing. Plus, I like to shop.
That's all very fair. I also like to shop quite a lot, but unfortunately, I don't have a lot of knowledge on taxes. I really don't know how they work. So let me just kind of start off with the basics. What is an import tax exactly?
An import tax is a tax that's charged on any good that's brought into the United States. You pay them every day when you purchase items. You just don't have to fill out a form every time you go to the cash register and buy something that wasn't made in the US. Somebody else has done that for you. When you travel overseas, whether you take a cruise or you fly or you walk across the border, when you come back in, you have to pay taxes on those items. Otherwise, it's really not fair to the folks who are selling them in the US and paying them. So that, in a nutshell, is what the fee itself is.
Okay. So with the different types of taxes, are they all a flat rate for, let's say, a bottle of alcohol versus maybe blanket or jewelry? Are they all like a fixed rate? Or does the tax rate change depending on the item that you buy?
With the exception of alcohol and tobacco, it is a flat rate. Alcohol and tobacco are completely different. Those are based on a per unit rather than the dollar amount, or in some cases, both. And if you're lucky enough to be traveling in and out of Texas, you pay additional taxes on alcohol and tobacco as well. But those are a little different and not quite as common. There aren't as many ships there as there are in the rest of the world. But for the most part, it's a flat 3% rate over your allowance, unless it's alcohol again or tobacco. And then it's based on exactly what you've purchased, the alcohol content, and the amount that you're over your limit based on where you've been. And it can vary based on the islands that you visited.
Nice. That's pretty cool. I didn't, again, I don't really know too much about taxes or how they work. I don't think I've actually bought any alcohol out of it. Usually I've kind of consumed it before I got back on the ship, so it's never really affected me too much yet with that. So with import taxes, so we know we get charged for them, but where does that money go? Does it go back into the system, or do you know exactly what we do with that?
I don't actually know what is done with those specific dollars. I'm sure they go into general funds. They may be earmarked specifically for something like customs, but my guess is they just go into general revenue like the rest of our taxes.
So how can we save money or reduce that import tax on it? Because I know you said that they're a flat rate, so how can we save money? Are there any tips or tricks about that, or how does it work?
There are a few tips. There aren't a lot. I mean, if you go over the allowances, then you need to declare those items and pay those taxes. One thing that you can do is you can aggregate your purchases if you're traveling as a family. So the limit, although they vary a little, and we may talk about that a little later, is typically $800 per person. And that's on goods like jewelry or clothing or electronics. We're not talking about the alcohol and tobacco. And if you're traveling as a family, that's $800 per person in your traveling party. It doesn't have to be that each person spent $800. So if I have my eye on some $3,000 beautiful piece of jewelry and I'm lucky enough to have a family of 4 with me, then I don't have to pay the additional taxes on that amount. You can aggregate, and then it's just the amount over that you pay taxes on, not the full amount when you go over.
Now, with that, what happens if someone gives you a gift of something, like a free item? I'm assuming you wouldn't have to pay any taxes on something that was gifted to you, correct?
You would still need to declare a value of that gift. And that would be part of what you're bringing into the country. So even if it was a gift with purchase that you didn't pay for, you should probably estimate the value and put that on your form.
What happens if you lie about something? I know there are people who probably forget to write it down, or they don't know about certain things. So what kind of trouble can you get into if you don't declare an item?
You can get into some pretty big trouble. But the last thing that I would ever advise anyone do is try to avoid, the duties are not terribly expensive. Some agents will waive them if you only went over $100, they may not feel like going through the trouble of collecting the $3 or $4. But you always want to be honest with the agent.
Mm-hmm.
You are subject to review, whether randomly or because something sets off one of their alarms, and they do discover items. It's going to be not only your time, but you could risk losing the item that you've purchased. Fines that begin at $300. And it's just, and you'll never go through customs again without being heavily screened, or at least not for a long time. And it's just not worth the trouble. We're talking about, I think a lot of people don't realize how small the tax can be, and that it is sometimes at the discretion of the agent. So you may just get waved right through, but you want to be honest on your list, and you want to try to keep your receipts, especially if you're purchasing big items. If you purchase them on the ship, most of the ships have alarms that will go off. So this happened to me recently. I purchased an item of jewelry that was over my $800 allowance. I did it on the ship, and we went to exit the ship, and we were sent to customs. We were waved through. The item was just a little bit over, and there were several of us in the party, but we were flagged before we even got off the ship. So luckily, we did have the item listed on the form. So we didn't have that issue, but we were actually stopped before we got off the ship.
Interesting. I don't think I've actually seen people get flagged. Is it pretty discreet, or is it kind of embarrassing? What happens when that happens? Because, I mean, if you don't fill it out on the form, do they just kind of give you a slap on the wrist? Or is it like okay, we'll let you kind of fly one time? Or is it just they're going to hit you with like a little, what do they do exactly when they stop you with all the fees?
In our case, because the purchase was made on the ship, when we went to exit the ship and entered my sail and sign card, it just dinged. And something, I guess, lights up on the agent's screen, and they say you need to go to customs. I suppose that between there and the customs line, I could have written on the form if I had forgotten something. And I did certainly look at my form and review it and make sure that it seemed accurate and complete. But it was clear that that was what the issue was. I knew I had purchased this item. As far as what they would do if I hadn't had it on the form, I really, in that case, it's kind of black and white. They know what you purchased. They have their, an agent has discretion there too, if you just simply forgot to list something. But I don't think many agents would buy that I forgot that I purchased.
Yeah, probably for $800 or more.
And, and I hear people say, well, I'm just going to put the ring on my finger or the watch on my wrist and just walk right through. Especially with electronics like watches, sometimes they're actually a little different. The version of the product that is sold across the border is a little different than one that might be sold in the USA. So they can catch these things, and they're trained to catch these things. I don't think they spend a lot of time when you're getting off a cruise ship examining every watch and bauble that somebody's wearing, but it's just not worth the risk. Had I been asked to pay the tax on my piece of jewelry, it would have been about $3. And $3 is nothing compared to at least the $300 fine. And probably risking much more embarrassing scenarios getting off of ships later. It's just not worth the risk, really.
So you were mentioning before that you had to fill out quite a bit of paperwork. Can you kind of talk about the paperwork and actually how to fill out the forms? Does it take a while, or is it pretty quick?
The form isn't too terrible. Most of you, if you've been on a cruise before, are probably familiar with it's a small thin blue piece of paper. Some cruise ships have actually been granted exemption from having to fill out these forms. I believe you get I have not experienced this firsthand, but I believe you get a notice that says if you need to declare something to ask for a form or something like that, but they assume that most people won't. You write on the back of the form, you check everywhere that you've been. There's some yes or no questions asking things like, have you been in contact with livestock? those are things not related to purchases, but related to agricultural security. You just list as simply as you can the items that you purchased and the value that you paid for them. You can summarize some things if you just bought a very popular item as miscellaneous souvenirs, and then that might just mean you don't have to list every single individual item that you purchased. But I would suggest listing your big ticket items, any electronics or jewelry, and then you can sort of aggregate everything else. You also have to list specifically the quantity of alcohol and tobacco that you bring back.
So with that, do you have to have a receipt for all your purchases? How do you verify the amount of price of that? Because I'm sure if you buy something in Mexico, you might not always get a receipt from some of these stands. So how would you declare an item when you don't have proof of purchase or proof of price almost.
Well, you're right. Sometimes you won't get receipts, especially for the smaller items or items that you purchase on the street. They're not likely to sit down and ask you to account for every penny that you spent on the form, unless you come through with a blank form and a suitcase full of electronics or something like that, in which case they may. If you purchase anything of significant value, that's primarily going to be, I think, jewelry and electronic devices. Make sure you have a receipt and keep it with you so that if there's any doubt. I would also recommend if you travel with brand new electronics when you leave, I would make sure I traveled with proof that you purchased them prior to the trip. Don't think they spend a lot of time going through suitcases, but if they choose yours, you want to have proof that it's your item.
That's a very, very good point there. I can only imagine Bird kind of going through customs and like, I promise you I brought all this beforehand. Thankfully, we have it all on video of Bird packing. I think there's a couple videos on Cruiseweek TV or our YouTube of Bird specifically making videos of him just packing up all of his electronics. He has several suitcases of that, so that's, yeah, kind of full. Anyway, let's get into some questions from Facebook. Mike Strike asks, what is the difference between an import tax and a VAT?
Okay. VAT is not something that you're likely to experience on a Caribbean or Bahamas cruise. VAT, which is a value-added tax, is something that's very common in Europe. You will experience it on European cruises, and depending on where you depart, sometimes you'll experience it on the ship for every purchase, and that includes the alcoholic beverages that you consume aboard. The VAT tax in Europe is a tax that stays in Europe, whereas the import duty tax is money that comes into the U.S. and is paid to the U.S. So everyone that's traveling in Europe is paying this VAT, which I guess the closest equivalent I can think of is that that's similar to our sales tax. And some countries do allow tourists to apply for exemptions or rebates on that before you leave the country, but that gets rather complicated and varies greatly between those countries. And that typically is a European and some Asian countries, but you won't see those in the Caribbean usually.
I had no idea what VAT stand for, so I really appreciate you kind of helping me out with that. A lot of times the guests or all of our Facebook friends on there send us a bunch of little messages, and they use these shortened words, and no idea what any of these mean. So I'm hoping, usually our guests understand what they mean a little bit more. Otherwise, Bird is trying to yell at me in my ear. Be like, that stands for blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm sorry. I'll figure it out next time, I promise. So are there any horror stories that you've heard before about someone getting in a certain type of trouble that they haven't declared something or anything of that nature? Usually there's always one type of story. Try to smuggle some weird object in.
Sometimes the object that you're smuggling is not so weird. I haven't heard, I don't know any firsthand horror stories, but there are the things that, thank goodness, the things that tend to be problematic that we don't really think are going to be problematic aren't ones that we're not paying tax on, but just things you're just plain old not allowed to bring back into the U.S., like seeds, agricultural products. You can't bring back that cute monkey that you played with in Belize, or the parrots. None of those things are allowed back in. And if you try to come in with even something as simple as a banana off of the buffet so that you can have it on your flight home, that could get you in a good bit of trouble. Cash can be an issue too, but only if you have more than $10,000 of it. And if you do go on a cruise with you. But those things can be problematic at the border. And of course, anything that's not legal in the U.S. can get you in serious trouble if you don't leave it in the other country. Even if it was legal where you were, if it's not legal to bring back here. And I'm not an expert on, there are some ways around certain things like prescription medications. That's outside of my area of expertise, and I don't want to advise anyone incorrectly there.
Well, Susan, we appreciate you coming on the show. Do you have any final tips or tricks that you can tell our viewers to kind of save a little bit more on their cruise?
Well, in addition to being able to add up together with your family, there are certain places that if you visit, you get a little extra allowance. The Virgin Islands is one where your allowance is not $800, but $1,600. And if your cruise goes to, say, St. Thomas, it doesn't matter where you spent that $1,600. You get to spend $1,600 on your cruise per person and bring it back. And that's why St. Thomas is such a popular shopping destination. Be smart when you're making your purchases. Make sure that you're getting a good deal. it's somewhere like St. Thomas, you can typically pull out your cell phone and use it like you can in the US and check around the prices, because you're still also dealing with salesmen in those ports that want to make a sale. And so that sometimes just saving the tax that you might pay is not such a great deal. The same applies for liquor purchases. You get additional liquor purchases when you're in the Virgin Islands that you don't have to declare if you buy at least 1 liter of alcohol that's manufactured where you're visiting. And that also applies, you get an extra liter if you visit Aruba, St. Lucia, or Barbados as well.
All very important. Alcohol is very, very important to me. Alcohol and food. So I wanted to thank you again for coming on the show, Susan. Really appreciate it. And we know all of our viewers appreciate you as well. Our photo of the week comes from the Facebook group New Orleans Carnival Cruisers, and they were all well represented, with probably the most pictures posted out of any group to date. It was hard to just pick one, but we did. This photo is from Nikki Thames, one who can only guess is on her grandmother on a stripper pole on the ship. I never actually knew they had stripper poles on ships. Maybe that's in the crew area. But she certainly looks like she's having a lot of fun, and I really like her t-shirt as well. Thanks, Nikki, for sending in that photo. I want to talk a little bit about our Cruise Week Inner Circle, and thanks to all those who have already joined in supporting the show financially. You can go to cruiseweek.tv/support and donate as little as $5 a month in our Patreon section. That helps keep our shows coming to you each week and enables us to produce these videos and interviews from the ships. Being an Inner Circle member, you will get some super cool things like exclusive Inner Circle only live videos from the upcoming and future cruises, exclusive photos, and early looks into what's coming up on the show. We thank everyone for their support, and it really means a lot to us that you like our show and support us in this way. If you want to show your support of Cruiseweek TV, our merch store is now open. You can get cups, shirts, hats, and more. Just head on over to Cruiseweek TV/merch and check out some of our offerings. This show and all of its wonderful abilities we have to bring in guests remotely would not be possible at the level we do without vMix. vMix is a live production software that powers our live show and many others high-end productions. From church services to football games, more and more live productions run on vMix. What our producer Bird really liked when he was trying to improve our show was they give you a full 60-day trial of everything. That way you can test it out risk-free for 2 months before you buy. Then they have systems starting from just $350. If you're going to do any sort of live streaming, you need vMix. Try it at vmix.com today. So next month, Bird, who oddly seems to go on more cruises than the rest of us combined, will once again be on the Oasis of the Seas. Amongst other things, he will have some super fun new camera equipment with him, including the new 4K 360 cam that he will be deploying during the parade. On the balcony cam of anyone who is in the Inner Circle member will be able to control and move it around. And interviews from fun all around the ship and on land in St. Martin and San Juan. Now, we do want to know if there is anything special that you would like to see that you didn't get to see last time you visited the ship. If so, let us know in the comments and we will do our best to get it for you. He will be embarking on that journey August 13th, and if you go to cruiseweek.tv and under Watch Live, you will see the link for the page for the cruise, along with that video windows that will be active during the cruise itself. I want to thank Cruise and Cat from RC's Periscopers group for helping us out over there in Periscope chat room. If you want to see a lot of live streams from people on ships, head on over to RC Periscopers group on Facebook for a list. Talking about Cruise and Cat, she will be on our show next week to talk all about her passion for cruising and how she started the Periscope group, what it does, and how you can better help be prepared for your next cruises. And if you know someone who will enjoy watching the show as much as you, be nice and share the link to their Facebook as well so they can also enjoy it. This brings another episode of Cruiseweek TV to an end. So until next time, guys, make sure you like our show, share, subscribe, and if you have anyone else that would like this, give them a call, let them know you guys like the show. Anyways, that's all, and as always, we'll see you on the ships.